Hello, and thank you so much for joining this very special episode of the E&M Pod today. We are talking about transcending borders and saving lives together with Raeanne Newquist of Mercy Ships today. Raeanne, we think, is an Enneagram 8. You'll hear her story, five-ish husband. But what we're really excited to share today is just a vision for how you guys can become united and help bigger visions in the world together, even if they're just like, okay, you know what, we teamed up, we're healthier as a couple, and we're going to help at our kids' school, or one of us is going to be a coach, and one of us is going to cheer the other one on, or one of us is going to do something huge like mercy ships that we'll be talking about today. And I'm just thankful for the timing of this episode because I'm recording this intro part right after the horrific incident with Donald Trump and just watching the nation try to piece itself back together, even being in church today, watching our pastor try to help us to do that, to really allow ourselves to love each other and to see the whole world mission of helping to love where there's so much hatred and brokenness. And I feel like we've been through tragedy and we're trying to realize, let's find our way together to do good things, no matter where we stand politically. And that just timed up, like I said, beautifully with Raeanne sharing, wow, just as a world, Nelson Mandela, Tony Blair, past US presidents, so many all over the world, volunteers from all over the world, including her and her husband at one point, have taken time to minister with an outreach toward people from West Africa who have just had disfiguring incidences, not even often life threatening, but as we know, outgrouping incidences that have made them ashamed, abandoned, and just to find recovery for them, hope, healing, just to hear the story. It's hopefully inspiring to you to say, okay, as we get balance here, this is a beautiful place where we can, of course, learn about mercy ships, but also learn about ways and think about ways and brainstorm ways you and your spouse can truly help this hurting world. So, again, really well timed around such a hard weekend event. And I hope you're all well. And I hope this just makes you feel that sense of empowerment in the midst that you can do important things together as you find your balance, as you find your light together, and also even as you take turns sometimes supporting one another's dreams. So let's talk to Raeanne right here. Raeanne, thank you so much for joining us on the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. We're so happy you're here with us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
Oh, yes, it is. What a beautiful topic, ministry outreach you have. Our
Mm,
audience first would just love to hear a little bit about you. And we
yeah,
got to talk a little bit about Enneagram type before we came on, but you could even tell us some of your orientation on that as well, if you like.
sure. Absolutely. So I have been married, it'll be 20 years in September. So coming on a big anniversary, we have three children. We have identical twin girls that are just about to leave us in a couple of weeks to go to college as freshmen. So we're in a tough season. It's really hard. We do have a third child. We have a son who will be a sophomore in high school. So at least we have 3 more years
Yes.
of a little guy at home. But
Yes.
Southern California was home to us for many
Mm.
years. All of our kids were born there, and that's where our community was until God called us to go serve with Mercy Ships.
Wow.
And that was a huge surprise to us. We sold our home and retired from careers and kind of sold everything and left.
Wow.
Um, and when we came back from our
Mm.
time on board, we felt like God was calling us to be a little bit closer to our family, extended family. So we relocated to Northern California, which is where we are now. So,
Oh, wow. What a beautiful area, beautiful story.
yeah.
But also the leaps of faith you took to be in your gifting, to be
Hmm.
united. This is so intriguing to our audience because a
Yeah.
lot of the time when we break through our marriage conflicts, we don't just want to be like a happy couple who takes a date night and is self seeking. We want to move up to relational care and then to the social, beautiful care of
Yeah.
just taking care of the least of these. So we're going to hear about that in a few minutes.
Sure.
But I love to just ask, where did you land on the Enneagram, if you landed at all when you were assessing?
Sure. So I did. I'm not very familiar,
Yeah.
I will say,
Yeah.
but I did just the other night take a test and somewhere around an 8 And so what I was reading is someone who takes charge and is assertive, which I would say that's true, and passionate about life, which is very true. I think passion is maybe one of my favorite words. I'm passionate about a lot of things. And so sometimes some people tend to think that maybe I overuse the word love, like I love Paris or I love this pizza or but I actually really do. I'm very passionate about a lot of things. So, but I don't know, much about it, but somewhere around an 8 potentially.
Yeah, that's really neat. And that tells us that you have some great leadership qualities, that you love protecting the least of these, which we already sort of
Mm,
said. So I can see that. Also, interestingly, just from all the interviewing I've done qualitatively, a lot of people who are 8-ish use the language of passion. In fact, they
mm,
prefer that when somebody says, "Are you so justice oriented that you get angry?" And they're like, "I'm just passionate. Like I feel a
right.
great burden on me." Is that how it feels for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes that does make me get angry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think passionate is a better word.
Yeah, and you're trying to do the right thing. Our eights, nines, and ones, which you're probably somewhere in that group, they really like to make sure they feel that calling on their life. Whereas some of the other types feel like my calling is to make sure everyone just feels loved. My other group would be, I just want everyone to feel safe. But the eights,
Mm,
nines, and ones really want to help people to have the right life, to be able to have a good life, and
yeah.
they have a strong sense and an instinct, a gut instinct about what's right and wrong. So, tell us a little bit about maybe even your hubby and how you two met, because he's joined you on this journey too. So we're curious about him and
Yes.
maybe his name as well.
Right. Absolutely. I'm married to Roger
Mm.
Newquist. And oh, I wish I could tell you our whole story because I
Yeah.
think it's fantastic. But
Ooh. Yeah.
basically, I'll give you a tiny little nutshell. I was a senior at Pepperdine University. I was about a month from graduating, and I walked into church, Malibu Presbyterian Church, on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And there was this man in a navy blue suit standing up
Mhm.
front. And immediately I thought, I will marry that man one
Oh
day.
my
I don't know who he is. I don't know his name, but I will marry him. And he had just been hired as the associate pastor at Malibu Press. And 9 years later, I did marry that man.
Oh
So,
my God.
and I mean, probably this would be of interest to you and your listeners,
Yeah.
but we couldn't be more different. We are extremely different people. He's, far more introverted. I'm much more
Mm.
extroverted.
Wow.
He is a man of few words. I'm a verbal processor. And, but at our heart, I mean, we
Yeah.
both love Jesus. We
Mm.
both have a lot in common. We both love to travel. We love food.
Oh,
We love restaurants. We love to
yeah.
eat. And we love to do that anywhere around the world. So we love
Yes.
to explore and have adventures together. But we are very, very different people. So my husband was in law enforcement. He was a first responder for over 20 years.
Thank you.
And after
Mhm.
he left ministry,
Yeah,
he felt
yeah.
like God was calling him to minister to the law enforcement community, which is what he had grown up in, actually.
Mhm.
So he became an officer, but also took on a side role as a chaplain within the
Mhm.
California Highway Patrol.
Oh,
And eventually that program was dissolved with the Highway Patrol, unfortunately, but they actually
no.
just renamed it Peer Support. But
Okay.
after 20 years of service, my husband just really felt like God was calling him back into full time ministry.
Mhm.
And he didn't really want to go back and serve in a church specifically. And we had a friend who years prior had invited us to support her financially as she went to serve with Mercy Ships as a kindergarten teacher on board one of our ships. We had
Wow.
never heard of Mercy Ships
Yeah.
before, but we were intrigued and we loved her. So we supported her. But flash forward a couple years when my husband was pursuing retirement, he looked at Mercy Ships and he said, they're hiring a chaplain for a 2-year commitment. And I thought, my safe, conservative, type A husband is not going to move his family to live
Yeah.
on a hospital ship in West Africa. That is crazy. I'm
Oh,
the crazy one. He's the
yeah.
conservative
Yeah.
one. So
Right.
I kind of just sat back and thought,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, go ahead, pursue that. It'll never happen.
Right, right.
And I mean, he became obsessed and watched every video that Mercy
Mhm.
Ships has on YouTube and he just knew that God was calling our family to go do this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when he came and said, we're doing it, I thought, are you serious? This is
Yeah.
like a dream of a lifetime for me to do something totally out of the box.
Yeah. That's
And so we
me.
went, and it
Oh.
was a beautiful, beautiful season for our marriage because I got to see my husband
Ooh.
thrive and grow in his gifting that I didn't get to see so much in him as a first responder. So it was,
Mm.
but yet he was a first responder on board, really, in
Yeah.
many ways.
Mm.
But it was, yeah, it was pretty amazing. So there's a little quick nutshell about us.
Yeah, and I love it, and I feel like a lot of our listeners who are really in and through the personality types of Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or whatever, they're hearing what you say, taking it with care that when he became his healthiest and most
Yeah.
aligned with God, he was so vibrant for you. And if
Yes.
he's a type 5 introvert, which he very well could be, observer researcher as he's scouring the research, being really careful and meticulous and quiet, um, they actually lean into the type 8 in health. And not to
Mm.
elaborate too much on it, but what I'm hearing you say, it was like oxygen to you when he woke up to himself in a really healthy space with God. And it was like,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
you were already loved and doing great
Hmm.
things, but now you are super like, you're at your healthy space and you're just like, I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was so life giving to me
Yeah.
to watch him come alive.
Yeah.
And I know even in our training before we got on board the ship,
Yeah.
um, they kind of asked, like, why are you here? We had to go around in a big circle, a bunch of the new crew, like, why are you
Yeah.
here? And I just said, I'm here for my husband. This is his
Mm. Oh,
adventure. And
that's
it
so
was really
good.
strange because
Love
some
it.
people were like, well, come on, like God called
Yeah.
you here too. And I said, you
Yeah.
know what? If you knew
Yeah.
our background,
Yeah.
I am kind of the assertive one. I am the
Yeah.
strong one. But this was a
Mhm.
moment in our
Yes.
relationship where God called
Mm.
him. God didn't call me. God
Yeah.
called him. And
Mm.
I obediently said, I will go where you follow. And it just so happens this is my
Oh,
dream. So this is awesome. But to watch him really kind
mm.
of be firing on all cylinders and get
Yeah.
to really live into who God's created him to
Mm.
be. And I got a front row seat. He wasn't at work all day and I
Yeah.
missed it, but I was there
Oh
observing
my
it.
gosh.
It was so life giving to me. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Oh.
Absolutely loved it.
Oh my gosh. And you just modeled for all of us that moment that I think everyone craves to know about their partner. Like, will you go if I feel a call in my life?
Yeah.
And it's so meaningful when you can say to your spouse, yes. And when you can
Yeah.
take terms, sometimes even saying, okay, this is a dream. I know you've had to have a baby or whatever it is, a million different things. I know at least my
Yeah.
husband and I over 20 plus years have gone through. And just to hear you say, like, I can sense you're doing a great job. Your leadership is on point. You're listening
Mhm.
to God. I'm ready. This is what I was made for anyway. Like how
Right.
beautiful. And we're going to talk about mercy ships and just
Yeah.
the beautiful ways that we can just learn about how we can even be part of that potentially.
Yes.
But I want to ask first, just before that, I know there's a listener or two out there or more who feel like I'm not there yet with my partner. We're still
Mm.
in that maybe dark night of the soul phase, or
Yeah.
we're not in our healthy space. How did you mitigate marriage? And of course, some of it is just you're like, I was doing my best and it was by God's grace.
Mhm.
But
Sure.
were there any pieces where you're like, this did help us to get by, either like date nights or conversations or prayer, like anything that stands out to you as helping through the harder seasons?
Sure, absolutely. I kind of grew up with parents who weren't totally aligned, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
especially spiritually. I
Yeah.
did grow up in a home where we did go to church as a family,
Hmm.
but my mom was just in a different place spiritually,
Yeah.
and I saw that struggle, and I
Mm.
saw, sometimes just their differences
Yeah.
drive them apart as opposed to bringing them together. But I also had a mother and a father. I remember my dad saying very clearly, divorce is not an option. And
Mm.
so they fought hard and they loved hard, but divorce was not an option. And I remember watching as I got into my adult years, their relationship transform and watch God do miracles and bring healing and restoration and beautiful things. I remember my mom saying, had I left a long time ago, I would have missed the miracle, you
Yeah.
know? And so I kind of took that into my own marriage and have really shared that with many women
Mm.
through their marriage struggles is sometimes you need to dig your heels in and say, hey, leaving is not an option, no matter how hard this is.
Yeah.
I am going to trust God for a miracle until a miracle is no longer an option.
Mm.
Or maybe the miracle I'm praying for isn't an option and God's going to do something different. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about extreme situations
Of
with,
course.
abuse and whatnot, but I'm just,
Right.
conflict and
Right.
struggles, that we all have in our marriages. And so for me, it was really a matter of being a prayerful wife,
Yeah.
really praying and kind of sinking into my relationship with the Lord during hard times in our
Mm.
marriage, seeking
Yeah.
outside counsel, seeking a
Mm.
good therapist if
Yeah.
necessary, and both of us going together.
Yeah.
But then, specifically about mercy ships, when we went, there was a lot of challenges on board because you're in this whole different
Mm.
environment. There's crew on board from over 60 different nations all over the
Oh,
world. So you're
wow.
living in a very multicultural community, but you're
Wow.
also living in a developing nation where
Wow.
you're surrounded by poverty and you're living in a hospital. Like
Oh
literally, the
my
hospital was right
God.
below our cabin.
Oh
Um,
my
so
word.
there was a lot of dynamics going on.
Yeah.
And my husband and I, had those stressful, tense moments where you could easily lash out at each other.
Yes.
But we kind of chose to say, first of all, there's not a lot of privacy when you're on board. So
Right. Yeah.
your business is everybody's
Oh,
business.
wow.
Those walls are
Yeah.
thin. If you're having an argument, most people know about it.
Yeah.
But, to really
Yeah.
say, what can we do to
Mhm.
stay connected? And we did have date nights. We would go out to
Oh, that's
dinner
good.
in the city, and we would find
Mm.
different places to get away. We had one of our
Love
anniversaries. We
that.
asked one of the school teachers, in fact, the teacher that we had financially supported years before, she was still on board with
Oh
us.
my gosh.
And we asked her to stay in our cabin one night.
Oh,
So, with our children, so that my husband and I, we went and stayed in a hotel one night to celebrate our anniversary and just got away and,
so
just did things
nice.
intentionally to stay
Mm. Oh
connected.
my gosh. Thank you, Rand. That is so helpful because you're just reminding us not only are you giving the tidbits and the giveaways that before there were stresses,
Yeah,
afterwards there were stresses, but that you learn how to mitigate those stresses by taking this wonderful time of rest and repair continually. You didn't just say, oh,
absolutely.
we learned that. Now we're out here ministering. And I think people get that confused
Yeah.
like, checked that box, got my self care, got my spousal care, time to serve. And what you're
Mm,
remembering is Sabbath and also
yeah.
marriage Sabbath.
Yeah.
So thank you for just sharing
Hmm.
that. And now we would love to hear some of the Mercy Ship's story. I
Yes.
know all of us are probably just curious. Just tell us a little bit about how it even got started, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So our founders are Don and Dion Stevens. And when Don Stevens was a young boy, God just gave him a vision
Mm.
about hospital ships serving the world's forgotten poor. He
Oh,
grew up in Colorado, nowhere's near the
yeah.
ocean, but
Right.
eventually he purchased a ship and with a whole team, just started this ministry. It's been about 45 years in the running, and we now have two ships. We are the largest non-governmental hospital ships in the world,
Oh
and
my
we
goodness.
do specialty surgeries. So we're not infectious disease, we're not
Yeah.
general medicine, but we do
Yeah.
surgery for free
Oh, yeah.
to people who have little to no access to medical care in West
Mm,
Africa.
mm,
And it is just such a privilege and an honor
yeah.
to serve. Like I mentioned,
Yeah.
people from all over the world come to
Wow.
volunteer on board, and
Wow.
not just doctors. I mean, it's Mercy Ships and it's a hospital. We do surgery. I'm not medical. My husband's not medical,
Amazing.
but there's people that serve in every capacity on board. It's like a floating city. We
That's
have housekeepers and we have chefs
amazing.
and we have academies on board for the children. So there's teachers from all over the world. And there's really, in addition to our nurses, our doctors, our surgeons, there's engineers and you name it, HR people, they
You
all
can
live
be
on board
used.
this ship.
Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh,
And
I
we
love
need all
that.
those positions. We need them, desperately to really bring hope and healing to these people who are dying from
Mm.
benign
Mm.
diseases. I mean, some of
Oh,
the
wow.
tumors that we remove, they're
Oh,
massive and they're totally benign, but they
yeah.
will suffocate and
Oh,
these people and they will die from them for really no reason. If you or I found a small bump on our jaw, we'd go to
yeah.
the dermatologist, we'd go to our GP, have it removed, not think
Yeah.
twice about it. But
Right.
because they don't have access or the
Yeah.
financial resources, if there was a doctor,
Yeah.
those things will continue to grow and take their life.
Mm.
But we have about
Mm.
6 different specialties that we focus on
Wow.
surgically.
Yeah.
And have treated over, hundreds of thousands of people at this point, with
Oh my
free surgery. So it's
That's
awesome.
amazing, and I saw it's like you can volunteer from 2 weeks up to 2 years plus. So
Yeah,
it's like you don't have
absolutely.
to feel like, "Okay, I have to quit my life." It's like if you have
Right.
a call on your heart to serve,
Yes.
this is
Yes.
amazing. So what are a few of those surgeries? I got to see a lot of the pictures. It looked like a lot of
Yeah.
children, women. Tell us a little
Hmm.
bit about what you're treating. You already named something, just some of these
Right.
surgeries that could have been, benign, but that could kill somebody.
Absolutely. So the maxillofacial tumors, we do a lot of those. We
Mm.
also do orthopedic surgery, and that's a lot on the children who have
Mm.
windswept legs or severely
Yeah,
bowed legs that can be a result of
yeah,
malnutrition or misplaced vaccines.
yeah.
So we will, and those little kids, they're with us the longest amount of time because their rehabilitation is the longest. So they have to be cast and recast and so forth to get their legs
Mm.
straight. But we do those little guys. We do cataract surgery. We do cleft lip and palate, plastic reconstructive surgery. We also treat a lot of burn contractures, which isn't something
Mm.
we see a lot in the United States, but
Yeah.
in developing nations, they cook over open fires. And so children tend to get burned, whether they're playing and they
Mm.
fall or what have you. And then their skin will heal, maybe fuse together. And so
Oh,
we will release those contractures and then they have
okay.
physical therapy to be
Oh.
strengthened. We also do another beautiful aspect of Mercy Ships is we do women's health and we
Mm.
repair
Mm.
fistulas. So a lot of
Oh,
times in
so
these nations with
yeah.
prolonged childbirth, there can be
Yeah.
a tear in the bladder or something.
Mm.
Oftentimes the babies are born stillborn,
Mm.
and then the mother's left leaking urine
Mm.
and they're shunned. They're often abandoned by
Oh.
their husbands and they're left alone for years, and it's really
Oh.
tragic. But to go in and
Yeah.
restore these women physically but also emotionally and mentally, they'll be on board with other women like themselves and they realize
Mm.
I'm not alone. And at the end
Yeah.
of their
Yes.
recovery, we do this beautiful thing called a dress ceremony where every
Mm.
woman is given a brand new dress and a brand new headdress, and there is a huge
Mm.
celebration where the crew are invited, there's music and dancing, and we just celebrate their new life. And it's
Wow.
lovely. So that's, I mean, again, there's so many other things that we do as well, but
Yeah.
those are a couple of the main surgeries that we perform. And I have to say, one of the neatest things about Mercy Ships too, in addition
Yeah.
to these surgeries, is our goal is kind of to work ourselves out of a job. We want to go in
Mm.
and
Yeah.
really bolster the existing medical systems that are in these nations, even if
Yeah.
they're small. So we do a lot of education and
Oh, that's
training and
great.
advocacy. We bring a lot of local nurses and doctors on board
Mm.
and we train them in specific surgeries that will help their own people, because we want to not be needed eventually
Yeah.
because these
Yeah.
people are serving their own. So
Mm.
education is a huge part of what we
Beautiful.
do, and that's ongoing. That's not just when we are there in port, but
Right.
that's something that is ongoing in our mission.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I'm sure everybody's happy to hear that, that you're not just running in and taking over, but that you're allowing them to share, here's what I know, and allowing them to
Absolutely.
learn from you as well and giving them the resources because
Yes.
that's what prisoners of geography need most. Um,
Absolutely.
oh my
Absolutely.
gosh. So
Yeah.
what is a story, if there is anything that stands out in your mind of just one of these individuals that we might be able to think of that you've seen? Because I'm sure you've seen so many.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to choose. There's so many, because the one thing that's incredible is that we really had free access to the hospital
Mm.
as crew members. So my
Oh, wow.
children would just go down in the hospital and play with patients. And
Wow.
even though there was a language barrier, they could bounce a balloon back and forth or, just color with them. And so we did have a lot of relationships with the patients.
Oh,
And there was one girl in particular, her
mm,
name was Habby, and I
yeah,
want to say she was about 7 years old or so. But when she was
yeah.
younger than that, she was someone who had fallen into a fire that when she was a child, and she burned the lower part of her face and her neck.
Mm,
And when she was healing, she was all curled up. And so her
yeah.
bottom lip fused to her chest. So if you
Oh,
can imagine being in that hunched over
no.
position with her mouth wide open,
Oh,
because just horrible things. And then all the ridicule and all of the really abuse that you receive as a child. She couldn't go to school
yeah,
anymore
right.
because kids would make fun of her.
Outwardly. Yeah.
A lot of
Mm,
times parents will disown their kids, but her grandmother took her in and took care of
mm,
her so beautifully.
good.
But
Wow.
to watch the care that she received on board by the nurses and the doctors.
Wow.
And she had to have several surgeries and then, plastic surgery to recreate lips for her.
Wow.
But at the end, I went down in the hospital on the day that she was being discharged after
Mhm.
she had been with us for quite some time. And her grandmother stood up and just gave this beautiful speech, really a testimony of God's faithfulness and God's goodness, that
Mm.
he brought hope where there was no hope for her granddaughter, Habby.
Wow.
And it just, I couldn't speak their language, but
Mm.
translators were helping us. And
Yeah.
I just sat there and sobbed because the
Oh,
amount of
oh.
gratitude that was just evident on her
Mm.
face and in her body language, it just
Wow. Oh.
completely struck me.
Oh.
And yeah, I just, that was such a beautiful moment for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
to watch God transform not only a
Yeah.
life physically, but
Yeah.
really emotionally and spiritually and mentally as well. It
Oh
was it
my
was
goodness.
beautiful. And not just the patient's lives are changed, but
Yeah.
this grandmother's
That's
life
what I'm
was
hearing.
extremely changed.
Oh,
So,
wow, the
yeah,
intergenerational healing and faithfulness. Oh my
absolutely.
goodness.
It's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a worthy calling. And I'm so
Mhm.
glad you've been a part of it. And now you're a huge leader within it as you lead. People may have actually heard you on your podcast, The Mercy Minute. And I'm
Yes.
sure everybody is just wondering, okay, how could I possibly get involved? How can I learn more? Some of them may
Yes.
be like literally like, maybe I could do that on my vacation. But I know you're
Right.
really reminding people there's so many ways to help, so don't feel like if
Yes.
you can't do everything, you can't do anything. Maybe you could tell us how people might think about getting involved.
Absolutely. There's kind of three areas that we talk about a lot, and it's give, go, pray. Some
Mm.
people are called to give. Like
Yeah.
we were
Yeah, that's right.
supporters, we were donors before we actually went. But that's
Yeah.
where God had us at that time. Our children were very little, and we couldn't go, but we wanted to give financially, and so that's what we
Mm.
did.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, God called us to go,
Yeah.
and maybe
Mhm.
God's putting it on someone's heart to go and serve, go use your gifts and your talents, whether it's being a
Mhm.
carpenter, being a barista,
Yeah.
being a receptionist and answering phones on board the ship. I mean, all
Yeah.
these areas are needed. Go. And really, the greatest thing anyone can do
Mhm.
for us is to pray for our
Mhm.
patients, to pray for their
Mhm.
healing, to
Mhm.
pray that their hearts and eyes would be open to the love of Jesus.
Yeah.
Pray for our crew. It is an intense
Yes.
environment and they work hard and they play hard.
Oh,
They get to
yeah.
experience an amazing adventure, but to pray for their safety and their health.
Mm.
We would
Yes.
love more prayer partners, but there's so many
Mhm.
opportunities on our website too at mercyships.org. You can
Yeah.
find all sorts of ways to give, your
Mm.
financial resources, to go and share your talents, and then to pray for us because we all
Mm.
need it so much.
Yeah, you're really helping us to see the depths and the layers of prayer needed, and also, like you said, financial resources and physical people going as well. And just
Yes.
I'm touched by you. My husband's always wanted
Oh,
to do something like this. He's a
do
PA, so he's gonna
it.
really be excited to hear. Um,
Yes.
so I
So
love this so
wonderful.
much. And is this where we get a hold of the Mercy Minute as well if we go to your website?
So actually, the podcast is New Mercies,
Okay, New
and the
Mercy.
Mercy Minute is our radio spot, and
Oh,
it's
okay,
just
thank you.
one quick minute that goes
Okay.
out on several radio stations.
Okay.
But the New Mercies is the name of the podcast where I've interviewed really over 100 nurses and doctors
Oh,
and partners to hear their stories. I am
ooh.
telling you, it's mind
Ooh.
blowing, the detail and just the experience that these people have had serving on board is, it's so inspiring and encouraging.
Oh,
So yeah, and those are, yes, all the podcast episodes can also be found on, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, but on
okay.
the website as well.
Okay, wonderful,
Yeah.
and that's the
Yes.
New Mercies or
New
just New
mercies.
Mercies? Okay.
New mercies. Hmm.
Perfect. Well, thank you,
Yes.
Rayanne. You're a beautiful light shining out there for Christ, and obviously so many are blessed by your ministry, so thank you so much for being with us and sharing
Oh,
today.
thank you for having me. It was a privilege.
Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning in. Wasn't that just so inspiring to hear the stories of lives changed forever intergenerationally and to think about ways that you could help? So, I want to make sure you know all of Rayanne and the whole Mercy Ship's information is in the show notes. And also make sure you just take one thing today for you. And it very well might be considering how to help Mercy Ships. It might be something else where you realize we have to get ourselves aligned a little bit here so that we can have this space to truly do something incredible. You are worth it. I am telling you. It takes self confidence, yes, but it also takes knowing you're worth it to make sure that you are getting your sleep, getting those dates in, getting that replenishment in so that you can give out well. Okay, so get one thing going, take a nice deep breath, and I will see you very soon. Okay, talk to you later. Bye bye.